you very much for rejoining us. We very much apologize for the technical issue that caused people to get kicked off.
And we do have a question regarding an organization that provides educational assistance for youth in a rural area of Alabama. And they want to know if their career development programs would be eligible for these funds. So we can go back to the eligibility requirements. So the intent of these funds are to support the provision of agricultural, business, and/or advocacy services for African American farmers and/or ranchers in rural, non-urban areas of the U.S. So the constituents that you are serving and that are eligible within this process must be African American farmers and/or ranchers. So the youth development, while that is a really great program, of course, that is not the intended purpose of this specific funding opportunity.
Are there any further questions before we begin back with question 4 on the application?
Okay, great. And not knowing where we kicked off, I will just indicate we were just at item 3D regarding the budget narrative. And so this is the budget narrative is your opportunity to describe in words how you would use funding, and it's very important that your budget attachments support that narrative. Okay, moving on to number 4. We want to understand here any networks or collaborations that you are either currently engaged in or that you might seek to engage in as a result of this funding that will support and further advance the work described in this proposal. So if you if that applies to you, please do list your strategic partners and describe the work that you are engaging in. Number 5 is really important. Again, this is related to the ability for the court to assess the impact of these grants. And this is what your organization will be accountable for demonstrating at the end of the grant period. So number 5 is one text box with 3. We want you to answer all of the 3 A, B, and C within that text box, which is related to how you plan to measure and determine progress toward your anticipated outcomes over the grant term and after the grant term concludes. So how will you, what methods will you use to determine whether you have been successful in achieving what you've sought to achieve through this process? And how will you ensure that you are learning along the way? So if you have identified that you are wanting to provide training for your staff so that you can serve more people or serve more people in a different way, you would want to demonstrate that you're measuring whether they are serving people better or serving people more extensively. And if they're not, that you are indicating how you would make mid-course adjustments to understand how best to use those funds to achieve the impact you're seeking. Within this description, you would want to ask key questions that you'll be addressing your evaluation. And you may, every organization will have different ways of measuring what they are achieving. So some organizations may be, it may be a combination. You may be measuring the success based on how many more acres are saved, how many more acres of land are saved for African American farmers. Again, you want to use very specific quantitative and qualitative information. You may be capturing the degree to which farmer income increases over this time and beyond. You may be capturing the extent to which policies are shifting in favor of good practices for African American farmers and/or ranchers. You may be assessing how well your services are providing support to farmers. So if farmers are reporting to you that they are feeling supported, they feel like they are better able to navigate the process of seeking loans or seeking credit, You know, the social emotional aspect of the impact of your work is really critically important too, of course. So we're looking at quantitative and qualitative measures here. Again, not asking you to create new measures, but to share the way in which you assess what you have been doing and what you do in your work. There is a question, there's a comment that you cannot hear anything. Can someone let us know that they can hear us? Can we write in here? Can you hear us? Okay.
Okay, so I'll type something.
Okay.
If you have any issues hearing or seeing anything that is on the screen, you can try disconnecting and reconnecting. Aside from that technical issue that we did have a couple of minutes ago, you should be able to join and exit as you wish.
So, in addition to describing what you're seeking to accomplish and how you will measure it, we want to understand who is going to be involved in assessing your progress with your results, with your outcomes. And that is what should be captured in that text box in question 5. In question 6, please describe any anticipated internal or external challenges, including financial, that you expect or anticipate your organization may face during this grant period, and what you would propose to do to manage them. Again, this is relative, all this is relative to the work and the organization, the effort that is related to the eligible services that for which the intent of this process is for. We're going to move next to section F, which is the fiscal information. First, we want the fiscal year, the range, whether it's January 1, December 31st, or July 1 to June 30th, or whatever your fiscal year is. And please enter the amount of your operating budget, so your total expenses of the most recently completed fiscal year. Also, the total expenses for that you have projected, that is in your budget for the current fiscal year. And the next is the total expense, the total operating budget, which is the expenses for the estimated for the next fiscal year. Item 2 gets at, again, the program budget. So that is the budget that is specifically for programs and services that you that captures the work that you're doing. So we want to know here what percentage of your program budget, what percentage of your overall budget is spent on programs. In the example I used before, there was an organization that had a $600,000 budget, and the $450,000 would be the amount. So you plug that percentage in for the most recently completed fiscal year, again for the current fiscal year, and for the projected estimated next fiscal year. Additionally, for project support requests, first, please indicate whether this is a new project or program. And an important thing to think about is that these grants are the intended recipients are eligible only because they have been providing on a historic and current basis the eligible services work. So if you're an organization that is trying to create, this is not an opportunity for an organization that does not have the historical or current demonstration of impact to create a new program to do so. However, if you are an organization or you have a project that has been doing this work and you want to, and you determine that the best way to stabilize or to increase the organizational capacity is to either expand or create a new program, then you would that would be what this is for. You'll want to really make a good case for that, but certainly that could be a possible use of funds. If it is not a new program, then please do include the project budget, so that the budget that is specific to the eligible services for the most recently completed fiscal year, the current fiscal year, and the estimated fiscal year. Okay, moving on to item G regarding governance and personnel. This is where you can describe how your organization functions. So number one is to please describe your organizational structure, including the roles and responsibilities of the board, key staff, and volunteers. Please do indicate any leadership and or management positions that are held by African Americans and African American farmers and or ranchers. Number two is if your organization is a member-based organization, please define the criteria for membership and whether there are dues. And if there are dues, that should be showing up in your financial documents, in your budget documents as earned income through membership dues. Item three is to please describe how your organization ensures that your constituency of African American farmers and or ranchers is included and a part of informing the planning and decision-making processes for your work. So please describe what your organization does to ensure that the constituency that you serve helps to inform the programs and services that you provide. Okay, we have made it through the proposal narrative, and we are now onto the required attachments. So, related again to the difference between whether you have a fiscal sponsor or not. Item number one, if your organization has an audit, please include your audit report for the most recently completed fiscal year. This would be for the 501c3 organization or for the fiscal sponsor, the 501c3 fiscal sponsor, or of the group that is conducting the work. If your organization is small enough that it's not required to conduct an annual audit, please check in that box and submit the following financial statements. A is the statement of financial position, which is the balance sheet, which shows the assets and liabilities. The next is the statement of activity, which shows revenue and expenses. And then third, not all organizations have this. If you do have it, please do include the functional expenses, which would be listing all of the expenses that you have, such as travel, salary, occupancy, along with the amount that is spent within each different cost center. So that would be for program, for administrative, and for fundraising, and it may even include the different kinds of projects. For item two, we want the annual operating budget for the current fiscal year. So that is the actual budget that shows the numbers, as well as the report for the estimated for the upcoming fiscal year. Number three is we're interested in this only for the group or the organization that is doing the eligible services. We do for the group that's conducting the work or the 501c3. We want you to provide, please, a report that clearly indicates the secured and pending funds and funding sources for your work. Item number four is the IRS letter of determination. This would be for the 501c3, whether it's the organization or the fiscal sponsor. So that is very specific to whatever entity holds the 501c3 determination status from the IRS. Items 5 and 6, again, are specific to the organization or group that is conducting the eligible services work. So we want documentation that evidences 3 examples of your past work, your work with African American farmers and or ranchers. This may come in the form of annual reports or publications. It could be press clippings. It could be testimonials from clients or constituencies that you are serving. Next, item 6 is a list of 3 external references that are familiar with your organization's work. Please include the name of the organization, the name of the person, the title, and the relationship to your organization, and contact information for email and telephone. We cannot guarantee that we will absolutely reach out to all of your references or any of your references, but they will certainly be, we certainly will do so if we have questions that we need to follow up on during the process. Additionally, for project support requests, you are required to submit everything as above, as well as the budget for the current fiscal year of the project or the organization that is conducting this eligible services work, the estimated budget for that work for the grant period, and a list of project funders, including secured and pending funds. Okay, believe it or not, we have made it through the nuts and the bolts of the cover sheet and the application. Can the references, here's a question, it's a great question, can the references be USDA agencies? I have no reason to believe that would not be the case. So I would say yes, we will again follow up with lead class counsel and include that in the information posted online afterwards.
So thank you very much to Caroline for taking us through the application and the cover sheet, as well as all of the required attachments. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. Okay. So once you've completed the application, you have a signed cover sheet, and have compiled all of your required attachments, you'll be ready to submit. For the cover sheet and application, please do not mail copies. They should be submitted electronically together via email to submissions@blackfarmercypre.com, with the subject of the email being your organization name followed by the word proposal. Please attach all electronic copies of required attachments if you're able to create them. This will aid Council's review greatly. We ask that files be named with the organization name and type of document you are submitting, such as Organization A, IRS letter.pdf, or Organization A, 2017 budget.pdf, etc. And all materials must be received by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, September 29th, 2017. If you are unable to create electronic copies of required attachments, please enclose a cover memo so that we can connect the document to your electronic cover letter and application, and mail paper copies to the address provided under the proposal submission details section of the application. Note that anything that is mailed must be received by the same deadline, which is Friday, September 29th, before 11:59 p.m. You will receive an email confirmation that your proposal is complete within 10 business days of us receiving the materials. If 10 business days have passed since you believe we should have received all of the materials, please contact us so we can ensure that your proposal is complete. Now, we do have a question. Can funds be used to do a conference for all grantees?
This is a great question. The intention, I will speak, and we will, of course, again, check with lead class counsel to ensure that this captures their intention. But the intention of this work is to stabilize and or strengthen organizations that are serving African American farmers and ranchers through the eligible services. And so if an organization feels that the most important thing they can do to do so is to hold a conference, then you can certainly make a case for that. We will say, however, that, and we will get into this very next, is that there, as we described in the beginning, this CyPRE fund is going to be, the funds are going to be distributed in the intention is for the funds to be distributed in two tranches, in two two different approaches. One is through this phase one grants process, and two is through a second phase. The second phase actually is going to include a convening. Lead Class Council is going to host a convening of the African American farming and ranching community and its allies to hear from folks about their ideas and thoughts about how to inform a good strategy for dispersing the remaining Cypre funds. So that is actually going to be not a conference per se, but a gathering to seek input on how to effectively create a distribution process to nonprofit organizations who are doing this eligible work. This related to the question about for grantees, folks who are not eligible to apply for and receive a grant in Cypre phase one are absolutely included, intended to be included in the visioning process for phase two. I'll leave the answer at that because we're going to get into what the visioning process is in just a couple of slides.
We will actually get to that now. So included on the website, blackfarmercase.com/cypre.aspx is a file named Cypre Phase 2 Visioning Document, and this can also be found attached to the end of the application. So we're providing this visioning document, and it will be used to inform funding priorities for BFDL Cypre Phase 2 grants. This will not be used to evaluate your proposal and is, as mentioned, entirely optional to complete. So this is a great chance to provide your impact on how you view challenges within the African American farming and ranching community and where you see opportunities. At the bottom of this document, is a space to nominate someone affiliated with your organization to attend the convening early next year. There may be funds available to reimburse travel costs, so please do not let that act as a barrier to your participation. Anyone, as Caroline mentioned, even those not eligible for Cypre Phase 1 grants may complete the visioning document. So if you know of a person or organization you think should contribute, please ask them to fill it out and submit it to submissions@blackfarmercypres.com.
Before we move on with the visioning document, there's a question here about whether you can use the best financial year since 2012 due to limited grant funding. Several organizations have had, due to challenges organizations have had and the hold that government funds have had last year. So I understand that from the community call, there was a similar question, and you may absolutely use your best financial year to assess the amount of funding that you're requesting. However, the documents that we are seeking to be attached must be, as requested, the most recently completed fiscal year, the current fiscal year, and projections for the next fiscal year. So again, you may request funding based on your best year. And certainly describe, if that is a situation that you have experienced, you'll want to give context to that in your request. And so that is that. The answer to that is yes. And please do provide ample context and narrative for that situation. And also please ensure that you provide the attachments as requested, which are for the most recently completed fiscal year, the current, and the next year.
And as we mentioned before, the calculations provided are maximum suggested funding requests. So you can certainly suggest something different if you'd like to. However, please do make a case for it, and please do consult outside counsel to inform whether or not that amount of funds could tip your organization over the tipping point and put your 501c3 status at risk. We cannot provide any legal advice as to whether or not that amount of money will tip your organization.
And another really important thing to note here is that we anticipate receiving far greater requests than is possible to be distributed. It's intended, the council intends to recommend that up to a third, which is approximately $4 million of the remaining CyPRI funds, be used for this first phase of grants. We know, given the organizations that we already know of, if each one were to request a third, that already far exceeds the amount that we have. So while you may request up to a third, there is certainly no guarantee that you will receive a third. And in fact, it's become clearer and clearer to us that the demand will far outstrip the availability of funds, and that decisions, it's likely that lead class council will be making recommendations of decisions that do not meet the request necessarily.
And please do keep in mind that council anticipates to recommend to the court that a second phase occur in which the remaining approximately $8 million are distributed to eligible nonprofit organizations. So this $4 million that are being expected to be distributed through phase one grants are not the final distribution of CyPRI funds as recommended by council. So I know it's been a very long webinar, but we've made some time now for any additional questions.
I think before, please do ask your questions. And before we move on from the visioning document, I think it's useful to go through some of these questions. If you could scroll up, great, okay. So please do attend to this visioning document. This is an opportunity for you to share your thoughts, your concerns, your aspirations to help inform the strategic funding priorities for this second phase. The questions we will review very quickly, but are to understand from your perspective, what are the most pressing factors that are keeping African American farmers and ranchers from thriving? So from your perspective, please answer that. Next are what are the most promising factors or opportunities that might enable African American farmers and ranchers to thrive? Many organizations may have similar ideas. There may be very different ideas that are innovative and exciting, or that just call out some systemic issues that must be addressed. Number 3 is to describe the future you imagine for African American farmers and ranchers. This is an opportunity to be aspirational if you so choose. Number 4 is please describe what strategies, resources, relationships, or other means that you think could be used to make the above aspiration, the above future, a reality for African American farmers and ranchers. We do want to, lead class council and the court wants to hear from you about that. Next question is similar to a previous question, but it's regarding what are the most pressing factors that are keeping your organization and your nonprofit organizations in general? What is keeping these organizations that serve African American farmers and ranchers from thriving? So it's a little bit different because it's the first question is really what's keeping farmers and ranchers from thriving, and this is specific to the organization. Number 6 is, again, what are the most promising factors or opportunities that might enable your organization and others like it to thrive? So that could get at a previous question regarding having a conference for all grantees. Number 7 is describe the future you imagine for your organization and others like it. Again, the difference between serving the constituents versus the organization. And the final question is what strategies or resources and relationships do you think can be used to make the above reality a reality for your organization or in general organizations that serve African American farmers and ranchers? And the bottom part, as Sylvia referenced below, is to please nominate if you are, and so we want you to please submit this information. Again, you may do so as part of your application, though it will not in any way be considered in the review of your application. Any entity may also submit this visioning document outside of the grants, the phase 1 grants process. And you may nominate an individual or affiliation of an organization to participate in a convening that Lead Class Council will be hosting in early 2018. It will be held in the South, and it will be a facilitated session that will seek to really hear from the African American farming and ranching community and its allies to inform this next process in phase 2. Please indicate why you believe this nominee would be a strong candidate for participating.
And once again, this form is entirely optional. Submitting or choosing not to submit this form will have no effect on the evaluation of your proposal. So now we can get to the questions section. So just so you know, there are all kinds of online materials that you can reference regarding anything having to do with the RFP, the application, the cover sheet. There is an overview document which outlines all parts, as well as an eligibility screen. And there's the frequently asked question document that will be updated with questions from this webinar and from the community call. And if questions still remain after you review those documents, you can contact the Cypre Grants team at administrator@blackfarmercypres.com or by calling 617-229-6483. And we'd love to hear any questions that you have currently. We have about 15 minutes for questions.
And if no questions occur to you at this moment, but if you determine that you are eligible to apply for a grant, and as you make your way through the application process and have questions, of course, please do reach out to us through the email or the number. And as Sylvia said, the materials will be available at the blackfarmercypre.com website. And so we will be as available as possible to assist you in this process. We have not had any questions so far. So here's a final call for questions before we close the session.
We'll give it about 3 minutes.
Okay, here's a question. Are domestic and international 501c3s eligible to apply? The intent of these funds are to provide stabilizing and strengthening funds for organizations that are providing eligible services to African American farmers and or ranchers that are operating in rural and non-urban areas within the U.S. So, and these do need to be U.S.-based 501c3s. So I can't think off the top of my head of a situation in which an international 501c3 would be eligible to apply because it needs to have federal 501c3 status in the U.S. And even very importantly also has to be serving African American farmers. The funding would be going to serving African American farmers in the U.S. Does that answer your question? We have yes, okay. Yes, so there's a question, if you're not sure if your organization is eligible to apply, is there someone I can ask? And yes, there is. There are various different ways to assess. Sylvia just referenced a eligibility screen. So a first easy way is to, or a way is to go to the website and find that eligibility screen and answer those questions. If that still does not clarify, please do reach out to us either via email at administrator@blackfarmercypre.com, CYPRES.com, or by calling us at 617-229-6483. And someone asks, do you have to have a fiscal sponsor if you have a 501c3? No, good question. If your organization has a determination letter from the IRS that indicates that you have 501c3 status, then that makes you eligible to apply. The only reason that you would need a fiscal sponsor is if the organization or the group that is conducting eligible services work does not have its own 501c3 status and is instead supported by a fiscal sponsor that has 501c3 status. These are good questions. Hopefully they have answered some questions for other people as well. Are there any other questions?
Okay, so it looks like we are wrapping up. Please, if you do have any questions that you were unable to ask, maybe you were calling in by phone, please do contact us. Contact the Cypre Grants team if we need any clarity from council, as we did in several of the questions that were asked. We will get that clarity and we will update the FAQ. It might take a few days, but that will be updated. If you want to follow up with us with that question that we were unable in the moment to answer, we should be able to direct the answer to that question to you in an email. It might get to you faster than updating the FAQ document. Okay, well, thank you all very much for your time. We appreciated spending this about hour and 3/4 with you. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
And good luck in the process of applying for the Cypre grant. Take care. Thank you.